Welcome to Commander Center, episode 2 of 48, and today we'll be taking a look at counterspells, but not just any counterspells. Counterspells in colors that aren't blue. I'm Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.
Boys, how's it going today?
TGIF, that's all I have to say.
I feel that, for sure. And, this will be airing Monday, but we get the WandaVision finale tonight, so I'm looking forward to that as well.
It's good. I was up.
You watched it already?
I was up at 5:30 this morning for no reason, so I said I'm turning it on.
I was up early and I saw already people posting stuff at because I couldn't fall back to sleep at 3 a.m. for about half an hour, so I was on my phone and I already saw people posting no spoilers, but people that had clearly were up super early just to watch it.
Right. I did enjoy Marvel going back to what they did for Endgame, and they made the YouTube video of Don't Spoil with Kat Dennings and Randall Park.
Nice.
They put that up on YouTube and all the social medias yesterday, so that was a cool campaign.
And now I get to binge watch it. All of them in one.
Nice.
So
Chris is going to have it done tomorrow.
Week to week.
Well, it's just a little bit of a reprieve, too. We get a week off, and then Falcon Winter Soldier kicks up in 2 weeks from today.
And then there's a week off, and then I think Loki starts right after that.
Yep.
They're not messing around.
Dana messaged me last night randomly in all caps the entire Disney Plus MCU lineup, and I'm like, question mark? Are you happy, excited yelling, or angry, frustrated yelling at me? He goes, sorry, that was meant to go to my wife. You didn't answer my question, though.
Were you excited?
Yeah, and I was, but she's like, so what's all coming this year? I'm like, I saw a website that has a full thing. I'll paste it to you, and somehow I pasted it into the window with Max. So, anyone play any fun games this week?
Negative.
I streamed, it would have been on Thursday night with the folks at MTG Nexus, a couple of the mods that used to be over at MTG Salvation a few years back, and they started MTG Nexus, and I've always had a good time playing with them. So I did that. My Vela deck had a good game. I kicked off pretty quickly, and then ate a austere command to blow up artifacts. Which took, I had 2 artifact lands out and 4 rocks, and it was a pretty brutal wipeout, and then got hit for, 18, and it took me down to 4. Turn came back to me, and it was just me and one person at this point. Came back to me, and I did have a Tezzeret Master of the Bridge in hand, which gives my stuff affinity, but at that point I had no artifacts. However, the austere command was tweaked to creatures and artifacts, not artifacts and enchantments, and it left my efficient construction out, which is an enchantment that when I cast an artifact, it makes an artifact. So I was able to play Tezzeret and then play I think it was a Hex Parasite for 1 mana, and because that made a Thopter, that gave me 2 artifacts in play, which then let me cast a Arcane Signet for free, which made a Thopter. So then I'm at 4. I rolled down Tezzeret's ability to return an artifact from my graveyard to my hand, which was a 4-drop. I didn't even really care what it was. Was able to cast that for free, which made a Thopter, which took me to 6. And then I had 1 more, a 6-drop in hand that I could then cast for free, which made another Thopter. So I was able to rebuild the entire board state, basically, just because of Tezzeret. I had just the exact sequence of artifacts in play because of that efficient construction, and was able to rebuild enough of my board state to survive the next turn. And the turn after that, I was able to get enough stuff out to use that Tezzeret ability to actually kill the person I was going against. So I was pretty impressed with how perfect that kind of worked out for me.
That's pretty good.
I am going to shamelessly plug myself. I'm going to be on an upcoming episode of the Commander Crunch podcast with Sam and Chesh. We're recording tonight, which is their Saturday morning since they're in Australia. So look for that in the coming weeks. I'm not exactly sure when it will air, but once I know, I will make sure it is announced on my Twitter and the show's Twitter as well.
And Chris, I think you're building a new deck you started talking about, and then we told you to wait to tell us on the show. What are you building?
I am trying to do this online because you guys always talk about building online.
Sure.
And I am trying to get my angel deck finished. I have it all written down what I want to do with it, and now it's got to build it and see how I like the way that it looks or not.
Okay. Who's your commander, or don't you know yet?
Oh, it's Kenrith the Returned King, buddy. What
5
are you talking
color
about?
angels. All right, nice.
Because the deck's name is Charlie's Angels. Because that is Charlie and his angels.
Nice. Okay. 5 color
a
angels.
little homage back to the female butt kickers of the early 90s and 80s and all that. So
You bet. Cool. Well, you'll have to post it online or in our Slack once you get it up so we can take a look at it.
Okay.
Wasn't Charlie's Angels from the 70s?
I think
70s?
originally.
Yeah,
I think
because
so.
I don't know. There were so many more remakes of it.
I just remember watching that 70s show, and, Ashton Kutcher's character, Kelso, always had Farrah Fawcett hair.
So I think there was what a ridiculous conversation people are saying right now as we're having this. So I think it was originally in the 70s, the one everyone kind of thinks of, the traditional like Charlie's Angels. I think there was a revival called like Charlie's Angels 1980 or something for like a season. There was the Drew Barrymore movie from like the early 90s.
Yep.
And then I think there was just like Elizabeth Banks did that one a couple years back.
Okay. So it's kind of like that weird movie called The Avengers with all those British people. That's not the Avengers type of thing.
Yes,
Gotcha.
Exactly. There you go. So we've gotten, I think, the full spoiler list for Time Spiral remastered now, and it's obviously all old cards, but there's some kind of cool stuff that's like being printed in the old border. Is there anything there that anyone wants to quick talk about that they're interested in, or are we all kind of just passing this by for now because there's just so many products to focus on coming up?
Well, you go ahead, Max, because I have a rant that I have to do.
Okay.
So.
I have a very short rant. Just print artifacts in a brown frame going forward. Like, they look so good. That Panharmonicon looks great. Like, everything in that brown frame is so beautiful, and that's all I'm going to say about Time Spiral Remastered, because I'm probably never going to pick up a pack myself.
All right. Okay, Chris, what's yours? Lay it on us.
I want a lot of those cards. I read a thing. Foils are 1 in 37 packs, so like 1 in a box. The next thing I'm going to rant and rave about is that this is a limited supply, and from my understanding, it's going to be next to impossible to buy in bulk quantities. So I'm very upset about that. Because there are a lot of playable cards for Modern in there, a lot of playable cards for Commander in there, and honestly, I just wanted to buy a case of it just to, up my stock of cards, and guess what? I can't. So I'm very upset and frustrated about it right now.
How much is the shop getting in here in town, do you know?
He hasn't even gotten numbers yet on what he's getting, and this comes out in 2 weeks, and that's through 4 distributors that he has. No one is doing anything. This is very similar to the Pokemon thing that's going on, where people are just not giving numbers, and then people are overbuying, and I don't know what's going on in the world, and it's starting to really frustrate me because I love this game, and it shouldn't be coming into my game.
Yeah, no, I hear that. Yeah, I've been mostly not paying attention for the most part, just because it's been such a busy year last year, and we're already about to dive back into Strixhaven and 5 Commander decks simultaneously before we go into the next thing. It's just so much. However, one thing I have liked, because this is a thing you can kind of skip if you don't care about premium versions of cards or whatever, or reprints, you can just ignore it. However, them doing the old frame, old border version of some of this stuff, I like, particularly some of the like kind of common cards. There's really no cool version of Read the Bones. And they're never going to print one. It's never going to be an Invocation or something, or a box topper probably. But there's an old border version in this Time Spiral of Read the Bones. So if you're somebody who's, got a deck they're pimping out and you want a cool version of Read the Bones, this is basically the only option you have aside from a pack foil. So I like that. There's a few of those cards that are commons. Evolutionary Leap I saw was one.
Beast Within.
Souls. Yeah, Beast Within. Yeah, there you go. Those cards that are just, they're not going to print some super premium version of it ever, because it's not a chase card, but they're in a lot of EDH decks, and if you're someone who has a foiled out green deck, this gives you a chance to get something neat besides just a pack foil of Beast Within.
Agreed.
So that I'm a fan of. I will try to pick up a few of those, although the prices look crazy expensive. I see everyone's trying to buy the Ponder, and that's insane already.
Well, I also noticed, too, I did a lot of research on this last night with a store owner, and people are price gouging hard on this product right now, and I don't know what is going on. I mean,
prices are insane everywhere.
Yeah, what your normal price should be, I wouldn't have batted an eye at, but people are pre-ordering it at $250 a freaking box, and it's no. It's
nuts.
The joys of having no MSRP, everybody.
I guess, yeah.
Thanks, Wizards. Wait, what? Huh? Yeah, I love you guys.
While we're talking about product, I just want to make a small announcement. If you're still interested in getting the Black is Magic Secret Lair that supports the Black Girls Code Foundation, those sales end at the end of March at noon, 11 a.m. Central on the 31st. So you got time still, but don't forget about it.
Yeah, the cards look really cool. It's a pretty good value as well in this particular one. So I think you ordered yours already, didn't you, Max?
No, that's why I'm bringing it up, because I was going to wait till March, and I'm like, oh, did I miss it? And I have a few weeks, but I'll be ordering them this weekend.
I need to as well. I want to get one.
I got lucky with that. Since there's no limit on how many of these you can get, I have a close friend of mine who is actually buying as many as possible. So I'm going to be able to get cards out of them that I'm looking for, so I don't have to buy the whole thing.
Nice. Yeah, it's a really cool set. And again, we say this every single time, but like these are kind of the ideal thing if you are a player who doesn't care about premium product, because it just knocks the prices down and everything else for you.
Yep.
So
right.
That's good for the game, I think, even if it does suck that LGSs can't get a cut of it. That's not great, but, can't win them all.
Yeah.
So if you out there in listener land want to reach out to us and tell us what you think about Secret Lairs or Chris's Charlie's Angels deck or me clearly cheating with my Vela deck in a game, how would you go about doing that, Chris?
You can find us on a multitude of social media platforms. You can find us on Twitter at CMDR Central. You can search us up on Facebook, CMDR Central. You can find us online at cmdrcentral.com, and you can also find us on YouTube by searching CMDR Central.
You can also head over to patreon.com and check out our reward tiers, such as a Decks You Play episode, which will air later this week, along with joining our community to chat with us and play some virtual EDH games. And this week we want to say hello and thank you to a bunch of new patrons. We have Tyler Adams, Andy Bentley, Matt Young, and William Y. Will.
Thank you all for supporting us, both the new patrons and existing patrons, and thanks for everyone out there who listens. Even if all you can do to support us is click like or upvote on your listening platform of choice, we really appreciate that as well. It makes a big difference. So should we talk about Counterspells here, gents?
It's the worst card ever created in Magic.
What? Are you just saying that because it's not red?
It's blue. Blue is the worst color in Magic. I hate the color blue.
Well,
hate's such a strong word. I shouldn't say hate, but I very much dislike blue.
Well, you'll be delighted to know there's some red counterspells here we're going to talk about once we get to that point.
Oh, and it feels good when you counter a blue spell with a red spell, and you're like, what's up,
homie? Yeah, it does. So we're sticking here specifically to instant speed counterspells, like the ones people can't see from your hand. There's a few older cards that are like on permanence that let you activate an ability to counter a spell. And we had talked about that. Maybe we'll actually get into that for a future show, because there's some really neat old things there that I think are fairly playable.
Quite a few of them too.
Yeah, but for now we wanted to stick to ones that like kind of take the form of a traditional counterspell you think of, where just somebody has mana free and a card in hand, and all of a sudden out of nowhere your spell fizzles. So there's some weird things here too that we're gonna pick some cards that don't necessarily say counter target spell. Some of these say, counter target spell. Some of them kind of functionally do the same. So here's an example. One of the white spells we're going to talk about, and we'll just make it the first one for the sake of it being simple, is Rebuff the Wicked. It's 1 and a white, instant speed, counter target spell that targets a permanent you control. That's just a straight up counter spell for things that target your permanents. However, there's also a card out there called Faith's Shield that costs 1 white as well. It's also an instant, and it gives a permanent you control protection of the color of your choice until end of turn. Functionally, countering a spell that targets permanent you control and giving a permanent protection from a color, unless they're blowing up your thing with a colorless spell, like those are basically the same thing aside from the wording. Maybe there's a few differences. Technically, you can use the Faith's Shield to give a creature unblockable because it has protection, that kind of thing. So, that one might be better in those situations. Rebuff the Wicked may be better if you have a Brawl out, where if you counter a spell, it gives you a bonus. But so the difference between like a hard counter and a spell that functions like a counter is kind of weird, but we're going to try to talk about most of those kind of things over the course of this because they do work as counter spells. So, Max, what's the first one? We'll go through white first. There's a few in white. What's the first one we have here for white?
First one is Dawn Charm. It's an instant for 1 and a white, and it's a modular spell, so you have 3 choices. You can prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. You can regenerate target creature, or counter target spell that targets you.
Now, I've seen Dawn Charm cast multiple times in Commander games pretty effectively. I don't have it in a deck.
Usually it's for the fog.
Yeah, right. Well, and that's kind of why it's so nice. It has that fog, which is almost never going to be a bad thing to have in your hand. And once in a while, you're going to get lucky, and someone's going to try to like force you to discard or whatever, and you can just counter it.
Yep.
So, and regenerating a creature isn't anything either. When someone goes to like, someone casts a damnation and, hey, I have 1 big giant beater in play, I'm just going to regenerate it. So yeah, I don't think you run Dawn Charm just for the counterspell portion, but I think the counterspell portion is pretty useful on a spell that has 3 solid modes.
Oh, I agree 100%. I mean, having the versatility of the card is what makes it more popular than probably any of the other ones we're about to talk about.
Yeah, I would agree. What's the next one we have here, Chris?
Next one we have is called Illumination. This is from Mirage, so this is an older card. I do believe that's Mirage, the little palm tree symbol.
Yeah.
So double white for this one. And this one reads, counter target artifact or enchantment spell. That spell's caster gains an amount of life equal to that spell's casting cost. This fits white perfectly, honestly, in my opinion. They're all about stopping artifacts and enchantments. They're one of the best colors in doing it, aside from, the worst color in Magic, which is green. So overall, this card is built into white into what it wants to do, but it's still another counter thing. Would you rather counter it over destroy it? Would you rather gain the life? I mean, it's another one of those what if cards, where you could have a whole discussion about this in itself.
Yeah, I feel like I probably would rather have a disenchant to deal with it as a permanent, particularly because artifacts and enchantments don't always do a thing that when it hits the battlefield, it's really, really good immediately. A Crater Hoof, if it says creature or something, there's sometimes a reason to counter a creature spell because they have a lot of times ETB abilities. Very rarely do artifacts or enchantments kind of function that way. So myself, I think I'd prefer to disenchant. Do you have a preference, Max?
I guess, yeah, in comparison to something like disenchant, that's probably overall better in the big picture. But just having this as an option, I think this card would be great if you play with the same 4 to 8 people, every week over virtual EDH or at somebody's house because, it's safe and whatnot, where that person that plays mono green runs their parallel lives and their doubling season, and when they play them, they're going to win the game. They have their turn set up. I think this is where this would come in handy. If you know your meta, I don't think this is something you would take out into the wild, say at a Magic Fest. I would rather disenchant or something like that.
And, artifact and enchantment applies too. Enchantment creatures and artifact creatures, which can be relevant plenty of times too. And you can't disenchant a Theros god because they have indestructible.
Nope.
You can counterspell with an Illumination.
Right.
So that can make a difference in some situations for sure.
The other thing that crossed my mind with this too, this type of card, is the fact, and something that we talk about a lot, is the mass protection spells that we've talked about, like your heroic intervention, stuff like that. Granted, it doesn't hit, artifacts and enchantments, but the more of those that become printed, your destroy cards are not going to work. So then you're going to start looking at counterspell type cards or exile effects, and this could fit into that, the other world if that ever happens.
Yes, indeed. Okay, the next one here is one I run in my mono white deck, Lapse of Certainty. 2 and white for instant, counter target spell. So it doesn't care what the spell is, it just counters it. And if that spell is countered this way, put it on top of its owner's library instead of that player's graveyard.
Isn't this
Fate Seal?
That? Yeah. Well, no, not Fate Seal.
Hinder.
There's a blue. Yeah, Hinder.
And not Arcane Denial. There's
the one that was really good in Modern for a long time.
Yes. Remand.
That one.
Yeah, Remand goes back to the hand, but basically, the same thing.
And ideally, and because it goes on top of the library too, it does buy you a turn. If it goes back to hand, sometimes the problem with that is if you counter a counter spell, they can just recast it. At least putting it back on top of your library is much more difficult, and it almost always is going to buy you a full turn and gives you a chance to do something to force a shuffle if you are in colors that have that option too. So I run this at my mono white Super Friends deck and have had fairly good luck with it. I've been pretty happy having it out so far.
Oh, this is probably phenomenal. I'm actually surprised that more people don't run this card. I mean, the ability in white to actually stop something on the stack that could, ruin, because white's not a very powerful color at all. It's probably the weakest color of Magic, if I had to guess. And overall, having that ability to prevent something from happening is huge for that color.
Yes, indeed. Max, why don't we talk about the last one here, since we already did Rebuff the Wicked. There's one more to go, and this one does see some play too.
Well, this one sees a lot of play.
This is Mana Tithe. It's a single white, and you counter target spell unless its controller pays 1. I can remember so many times where I've seen this come out against a big X spell at the table. Just be like, oh, you tapped out? I'm going to, counter your debt to the debt list or something like that.
I've had a turn 1 Soul Ring get hit with a Mana Tithe once.
Oh, I wouldn't even hesitate. That would feel so good. I'd be like, oh, yes.
And it was hilarious. I mean, how do you not laugh at that? So I've had a turn 1 Soul Ring hit, and it's also, and then that established that precedent. Okay, this person has a Mana Tithe. So since then, when I've played them, I've always made sure to try kind of play around it. Like you do in blue, you're like, oh, do they have a counterspell up? This person's playing a Selesnya deck, and I know they have a Mana Tithe, so you're more careful. It does change kind of the metagame then as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad card overall. I mean, you can cast it even if someone has like 5 mana up. You still cast it because it forces them to sit and think like, okay, I was going to play 2 spells this turn, and now with them making me tap down an extra one to cast 1, I'm stuck to 1 spell. So which one's better out of the 2?
Yeah, can make a big difference for sure. All right, Chris, we'll throw this next one to you because we're into red now. Talking about the couple of red counter spells, there are a few. There's definitely a few red-blue ones, which is also quite useful to know if you are playing like in a deck that has a Sunforger or something. But there's also ones that are mono-red, so why don't you read the first one here to us?
We have Artifact Blast, which is 1 red. This one counters any artifact as it is being cast. Personally, I think this card is not good because red is known for destroying artifacts. But we go back to the other card I was talking about, Illumination. It could, in that meta, if that ever happens, protection spells, this could be a thing that you could play then. Yeah.
And you can counterspell a Blightsteel Colossus in a way that you can't destroy it with a Shatter or an Abrade or something once it's on the field.
Yeah, till Modern Horizons 2 and, Wizards prints a broken card again and something happens. And yeah.
I tend to agree. Like, I knew this card existed, actually, but it's one of those ones I've never really considered for a red deck. For the same reason you said, there's just so many ways in red to blow up artifacts already that, maybe hitting a Darksteel Fort on the stack is probably not worth all the times you'd rather just blow something up when it's in play.
True.
The next one we have here is Burnout, 1 in a red. Counter target instant spell if it's blue. And technically
that's not what it says.
It says interrupt on it, but counter target instant spell if it's blue. So someone casts a blue instant for 1 in a red, you can counter it. And it also says you draw a card at the beginning of next turn's upkeep. I have had a spell countered by Burnout before.
It's actually really good.
I have very bad memories about this card.
Personally, I would run 2 cards we'll talk about later, Red Elemental Blast and Pyroblast. Before I would run this, they cost 1 less. They do more. Quite a bit more. I don't think it's worth spending 1 and a red just to draw a card to have far less targets with it. But I've lost spells to it before. So
this is definitely a meta call by far. Although the flavor text on it is perfect. So, I mean, can't complain about that.
Yeah.
So I would like to tell my little story about this card, and it has to pertain to our good friend Dr. Mike.
I think he's the one that's hit me with it before, too.
This is the card, when he played it against me, I knew he was past our tutelage, essentially. I had the game locked down at the LGS years ago, and I went to be safe and Rift or something, and he's like, no, I'm going to burn out that, and he, super excited, and I'm like, I've never even heard of this card, and I'm like, oh, that works. And I'm like, wait, you get to draw a card too? He goes, yeah. I'm like, no, I'm no longer playing with you for a while, Dr. Mike. You're done. Build with cards people know, not this random stuff you find at the garage sale.
It was something to behold for sure. All right, Chris, what's the next one we have here?
We have Mage's Contest. This is a 3 mana instant from Invasion. So this is a little bit newer, so people might know about this one. So for 1 colorless and double red, it reads, you and target spell's controller bid life. You start the bidding with a high bid of 1. In turn order, each player may top the high bid. The bidding ends when the high bid stands. So the highest bid loses life equal to what the high bid was. And if you win the bidding, counter that spell that the spell is targeting. So I wish this was modern legal because I would totally jam this in a burn deck of some sort just to be like, I bid 1 and just be like, come on, do it. I dare you.
I think the first time I saw this when I was doing research for this show topic. I don't know if I've never seen this cast before.
Really?
I don't know if I've ever stumbled across it. Yeah.
I've never seen it cast neither.
I've never seen it cast, but I think there's one in my bulk bin because every time I come across it, I'm like, this is so crazy and I really want to try it, but I don't play this color. Like, what would I do with it?
It makes you think it's like an unglued card or an unhinged card or something, the way that it's worded.
Well, the thing I was wondering is if it wouldn't work good for that new Greven Predator Captain deck where Greven gains +X+O based on how much life you lost that turn.
Ooh.
And you could just, like, if you wanted to dome somebody, cast a spell and then go to counter, or I guess, yeah, you could do it to yourself. Why not?
You could.
So cast something, counter
Doesn't
with Mage's
seem worth
Contest.
It, but
yeah,
because everyone's gonna look at your commander and then look at that and be like, "No, you can have it at 1."
But I guess it starts with a high bid of 1, and each player may top the high bid. So you can just top that high bid. You can just say 20. Lose 20 life, Grevin gets pumped by 20, and you dump somebody. I don't know if I want to do that, but it would be pretty hilarious.
This is definitely one I'd have to get a judge in on and be like, okay, so how does this bidding work? And when does it stop?
Exactly.
Like, does someone have to outbid me, or can I outbid my own bid? And
you would have to have a target as well to hit with it. So, I mean, it's more funny than anything.
I think you could. So, like, the card says you start the bidding with 1. So I cast it. I start it with 1. I'm countering something of Chris's. He doesn't raise the bid. It comes back to me. I could raise the bid, I guess, because it says if the high bid stands. We need a judge. That's what we're
right.
Chris is right.
I love this card, though. This is actually one of them that I do not own. I might have to pick one up just to add it to my red collection.
I'm very scared this is going to show up one night in Mogus or something just for fun.
Oh, it would too. I wouldn't even care. No, I don't know, man. I lose enough life in that deck. This would be like a double-edged sword again.
You pair it with Wound Reflection, and if you lose the bid, that's just better for you.
As I told you and other people, who play Wound Reflection, you know who I'm talking about. I will not play Wound Reflection anymore.
Oh, boo.
All right, what's the next one here we have, Max?
The next one is Molten Influence. It's 1 and a red. Counter target instant or sorcery spell unless its controller has Molten Influence, deal 4 damage to him or her. This is intriguing because I think unless you're at 4 or 6 or, in really grave danger of losing the game to life loss, wouldn't you just take the 4 in Commander? Like,
I would assume
I get in Standard or Modern or Legacy, like 20 life, that's a big chunk of your life. This is 10%.
You also got to think that, red also plays all your gratuitous violence, your Dictate of the Twin Gods, your double damage dealers. So, I mean, when you play this, it could be,
true.
Okay, counter it or you take 12 damage or something.
True, because this is damage, not life loss. Yeah. You're right.
Now, Chris, would this be a really good modern burn spell?
Yes, if it were modern legal.
I was wondering about that one. That was the one that made me raise an eyebrow. I'm like, man.
For 2 mana, I would play this. I guarantee your Jeskai control list would be playing this too, because that's how they win is off their lightning helixes and lightning bolts and stuff. So I mean, overall this card would make an impact in modern if it was legal. 2
mana to take out their instant or sorcery, or they take 4 damage is almost going to always be a win-win for you. The next 2 we'll kind of talk about together here, we have Pyroblast and Red Elemental Blast. The difference here is Pyroblast destroys or counters permanents or spells if they're blue, and Red Elemental Blast counters or destroys blue spells or permanents, which basically means that if you're using Pyroblast, you can still target something and it just won't work. So if somebody casts a green instant, if you want to, you can cast Pyroblast and it just will fizzle, whereas you can't even cast Red Elemental Blast.
Yep.
I think that's relevant a little bit in older formats with Storm. Is that correct?
Probably, yeah, because you can add more stuff to the stack. But I mean, these cards, they usually only see play in Legacy if you're playing I think it's the Painter Servant deck or something like that, where you can change the colors of the cards. And then you're just no, I just counter anything that you play, or I do other stupid shenanigans. But other than that, I haven't really seen these played too much, aside from in Commander. I've seen these played a lot in Commander.
If you're playing Mono Red or Boros, Pyroblast and Red Elemental Blast are both, I think, really good.
Yes, because blue just kind of outpaces you with the card draw. They have the stupid Cyclonic Rift and other stuff like that. So why not have a spell for 1 mana that just shuts down all their most, expensive, powerful stuff?
Counter that Rift, counter that big draw spell, blow up that Jin-Gitaxias or that really crazy Consecrated Sphinx, drawing them too many cards. It's a very good. They're both very good cards in Commander for sure.
I'd love to see someone cast an X spell for 20, and then someone's like, "Oh, I'll mana drain that," and then another player's like, "I'm gonna Pyroblast your mana drain. What's up, homie?"
So, Max, what's the last one we have here for red?
The last one, and quite possibly the newest card on this entire list, is Tybalt's Trickery. From Kaldheim. For 1 and a red, counter target spell, choose 1, 2, or 3 at random. Its controller mills that many cards and exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card with a different name than that spell. They may cast the card without paying its mana cost, and then they put the exiled cards on the bottom of their library in a random order. This has just been banned in a bunch of formats, right?
It got banned before it could see play in a lot of formats.
In
pretty
paper.
much just upon release, it got banned because they were worried about the implications that this card could have in your modern. And I think it's still legal in standard. I could be wrong. But
because it doesn't say target spell your opponent controls. People were primarily using it to hit their own things.
Yep.
And trying to essentially using one of those old school polymorph chains to turn it into an Emrakul or something.
Yes.
Yeah, I believe because on MTGO, this set came out before Paper, obviously, and they were using it to go into, Tybalt or Emrakul or something like that.
Yep. Now, in Commander, though, that's a pretty fair card, and it's actually fairly usable, particularly if you're the kind of deck where, like, you are afraid of counterspells or you are afraid of board wipes or something, and someone isn't going to be casting those things against you unless you're, like, trying to win. Turning that board, like, the odds of them having their Wrath of God turning into a Day of Judgment or something are pretty low. The odds of them having their counterspell turned into another counterspell of some sort are pretty low. So, like, this is the kind of thing, if you were in that kind of red deck and you are going to be taking, like, Hail Mary, Grand Slam kind of shots to win the game, you don't care what they're going to put in play. You just want them to not stop you.
Yep. This card, it reminds me of the same aspect as what Chaos Warp is.
Yeah.
Where red and black, the two colors, are missing a lot of the key removal spells for, like, enchantments and artifacts in black and stuff like that. Whereas this card fits into that slot where, you pretty much have it there as a removal spell for something comes down that you can't remove off the table and you're scared of.
Yes, indeed.
Here's something interesting. I'm just reading the rules on this card. Tybalt's Trickery can target a spell that can't be countered. If Tybalt's Trickery resolves, the target spell won't be countered, but all the other effects will occur.
Makes sense.
Sure, because they're separate clauses, separate by periods. So
wow.
Sure.
Cool.
That's neat.
Interesting.
I don't... And there's probably situations where that matters, too.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go and pick one of these up because I know they're super cheap right now, even the special borders and stuff like that since it got banned.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, if you're playing red-blue, you're probably better off just running a blue counterspell, but if you don't have access to blue, that's a really solid card.
Yeah, honestly, in mono red or Boros, it might be something to think about, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, we'll go to black next. Chris just talked about how black in Rakdos doesn't have a lot of options, but there are a few black counterspells, too.
There sure are.
First one here is Dash Hopes, double black for an instant. When you play Dash Hopes, any player may pay 5 life, and if a player does, counter Dash Hopes, and you can counter target spell with it. This was, built with Standard in mind back in the Time Spiral block. Commander, I've seen it cast, but I think the time or two I've seen it, the person just paid 5 life.
I have played this card in Modern, and it has caught people off guard. And it's
I would
freaking
bet.
Hilarious. It's just like, oh, they play this, and you're like, Dash Hopes, and they're like, what is that? And they start reading it, and they're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, well, in those certain decks, it's a win-win because it's any spell. So, like, If it's something worth countering, you're probably happy with them losing a quarter of their life or losing the spell. For 2 black, that's not a bad deal. Commander, yeah, they'll just lose the 5 life and probably not notice it.
Yeah, and you can't double it up like we were talking about with the other one and stuff like that. So
the next one here, Max wants to read to us. It's not quite a counter spell, but like it functions like it for the most part, and it does see a bit of play.
Yeah, so the next one is Imps Mischief. It's 1 and a black. Change the target of target spell with a single target. You lose life equal to that spell's converted mana cost. If that's saving, if you need to spend 2 mana, lose 3 life to redirect a beast within, or a single targeted rift. I don't know what else has a single target in EDH besides, lightning bolt.
Path, swords, all that stuff.
Well, here's what I have. I run this in my mono black deck, and I have managed to one time when someone counterspelled something I was doing, I cast a Go for the Throat on just some random creature, and then cast Imps Mischief
to counter
to redirect their counterspell to the Go for the Throat.
Nice.
No, that's not going to, you need to have a second instant speed spell in hand to do that, but like you might, that is going to occur sometimes as well. So like you can on occasion do those kind of goofy things with it also.
Yep. I've seen it mainly cast for like things like artifact mutation or aura mutation or something to dodge your stuff to put it onto someone else.
Sure.
And really hinder them. And I mean, the other person's still getting the tokens or whatnot, out of the spell, but to hinder the other players out. Yeah,
this is solid in a mono black deck. I definitely play it. And Chris, what's the last one here?
The last one in the color of black that we're going to talk about is called Withering Boon. 1 colorless and a black for this. And this is another old card from Mirage again. And it reads, pay 3 life, counter target summon spell. Now, a summon spell is a creature spell, so I'm sure that's what's eroded to now.
Correct.
So that's pretty much what you're doing is any creature that gets cast, you can pay 3 life to counter it.
We're kind of in that same place we were with Artifact Blast and with Illumination where...
Because black can kill everything.
Black can kill creatures, yeah. I think I have seen this cast before, though, but myself, I feel like I would just run a removal spell most of the time.
I mean, this would be nice in a deck, say, such as a Marchesa deck or something like that, that wants their life total lower.
Yeah.
Just something more in the deck to reduce their life total so they can have their other triggers. Because, Dethrone's, you need to have less life than other people. So why not do it that route?
Yeah, no, that could make sense.
Is that a little foreshadow there, Chris, for later this week?
I'm not saying anything.
Okay, well, we will go to green next. Green doesn't have any... well, that's not even true. Green has a couple things that tend to work, like the face shield thing we talked about before, where it gives a thing hexproof or something. But it does have one actual real counter target spell card from way back in the Legends originally, and it did get a reprint in Time Spiral block. Avoid Fate is an instant that says counter target instant or aura spell that targets a permanent you control. And this could very easily just read target permanent you control gets hexproof, and it would basically do the same thing, but it does let you, for a single green, counter a thing in colors that don't normally get to do that. So I have seen this cast before as well.
Yeah, there's definitely way better ones. I mean, you got how about I just don't talk about the next one, because we're going to talk about it anyways.
Exactly.
I just scrolled and I looked at it. I'm like, wait, no, it's right there.
Well, why don't you jump into those two, Chris?
So the next ones would be like Veil of Summer and Autumn's Veil. They're pretty much identical cards. Veil of Summer reads differently than Autumn's Veil, all that fun shenanigans. I'm not going to get into that. But Veil of Summer for 1 green reads, draw a card. If an opponent casts a blue or black spell this turn, spells you control can't be countered this turn. You and permanents you control gain hexproof from blue and from black until end of turn. So basically, this card sees so much modern play. It's like a $9 card for an uncommon. I mean, it's stupid.
Yeah,
but
it's crazy.
Pretty much you're just saying, you know what, we're going to gain hexproof from blue and black, so you can't do any of your stupid shenanigans with those colors. I'm going to draw a card because you cast this blue and black spell, and then, you know what, all my spells can't be countered by your counterspell, so I'm just going to, stop everything that you're doing. Pretty much countering you, as what we're talking about, from doing anything to me for the rest of the turn.
Yeah, Veil of Summer and Autumn's Veil both see quite a bit of CEDH play in green decks that don't have access to blue, but I've seen them cast in regular Commander as well, and they're both really solid. I run Veil of Summer in my Recce deck in mono green as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a phenomenal card.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that, they printed another one like this, honestly.
Right, yeah. So those are the couple in green. There's also a few weird things in green, like, if you want to split hairs here, when someone goes to destroy one of your things and you cast Heroic Intervention and give it hexproof, like that kind of functions like a counter spell. And there's a handful of things in green that do give your things hexproof at instant speed. So there's those kind of effects as well. But these are the main ones that kind of work and feel like a counter spell for the most part. Colorless has a couple options out here we might as well talk about.
They sure do. I play one of these in Modern, too.
What's the first one here, Max?
The first one is Not of This World. It's 7 generic mana, and this is actually a tribal instant labeled Eldrazi. And it says, counter target spell or ability that targets a permanent you control. And then Not of This World costs 7 mana less to cast if it targets a spell or ability that targets a creature you control with power 7 or greater. I mean, if you're playing a colorless deck, you're probably playing Eldrazi or Traxos or big old dumb artifact creatures where you probably can get that reduction very quickly.
Well, and I went and checked. There are 71 different commanders with a base power of 7 or more just by default. And 50 of those are not blue, so they don't have access to any other counter spells aside from the ones we talked about. But like Avacyn Angel of Hope, Gishath, things like that are like very popular. And just by default, this winds up being a 0 mana counter spell that targets your commander.
Yep.
That's pretty decent in some decks.
For sure.
Yeah, if they're hurting on anything else, or if they want to go off the beaten path. Like I talk about all the time. I love seeing it when people stray away from, the staples of decks and they start going into cards like this where you're like, oh, that is a card. That's right. That's pretty cool. And, I would love to see more of this stuff cast.
Well, in one of the things that kind of jumped out at me, I just happened to notice it as I was going through the list of 7 power or more commanders, Gargos Vicious Watcher that triggers when it's targeted by something because it cares about a target and not about the resolution. If someone goes to like Swords to Plowshares your Gargos, you can Not of This World it, counter the spell, and still get the trigger off of someone targeting your Gargos. Like that really probably feels pretty good.
I mean, that's also, you could do it, if you're counter your own spell, target it with something that you own and then counter it and get the trigger. And I mean, you're wasting a lot of resources, but sometimes you got to do it.
Exactly. So what's the last one here, Chris?
The last one is
Or the
Warping
last colorless
Whale.
one, I should say.
Yep, Warping Whale for 1 and a colorless, meaning that you have to have a colorless source to cast this card. This came out of the newer Zendikar sets. I don't remember the names of them anymore.
This is Oath of the Gatewatch.
Yeah, this set was not the best of the Zendikar sets. That's probably why they went back, but whatever. So you have choose one. This is another versatile card very similar to Dawn Charm. So choose one, exile target creature with power toughness 1 or less, counter target sorcery spell, or put a 1/1 colorless Eldrazi Scion creature token onto the battlefield. It has sacrifice this creature, add 1 colorless to your mana pool. This card gets played a lot in Modern with your Eldrazi decks, your Tron decks, all that stuff. A lot of times it's there for the exile a creature thing or to create the Scion, but sometimes the counter actually does come up.
Sure. Yeah, instant speed making a 1/1 blocker, particularly in a colorless deck, but there's a lot of other decks, mono black, you're just dropping a 1/1 blocker or countering a sorcery spell is pretty decent. Exiling a creature with power 1 or less, there's plenty of times that's probably worth doing too. So yeah, this is a real solid modular card. I don't run it in anything currently, but it's one I've thought about in mono black and mono white before.
Yeah, I definitely in a colorless deck, I would see this a lot of play.
Yeah.
Like if you're playing any of the Eldrazi Titans as your commander or something like that. Just a simple fact of you create a Scion that gives you ramp to start casting those bigger creatures. Or it's an Eldrazi to begin with, so you could have some sort of, anthems of some sort that hit Eldrazi and just make that bigger as well.
All right, we have one multicolored counterspell here that doesn't have blue in it.
I have cast this card a lot in my lifetime.
Why don't you read this one to us then, Chris?
This is Guttural Response. This is a hybrid card out of Shadowmoor, I do believe it is.
I believe so.
For a red or a green, and it is counter target blue instant spell. So a few years ago, I played Skred religiously in Modern, and the big downfall of Skred being mono red is you would run into the control decks. And when you pull this out of the board, the amount of people that I saw get all huffy and puffy when I countered their cryptic command was beautiful. Like, I just wanted to sit there and just laugh at them. But, being a professional, I didn't laugh at them. I'd just go back to my buddies later and we'd all get a good kick out of it. But this card was phenomenal for that. Now, in commander purposes, you're in red and green, so why not play Pyroblast and all the other ones?
Right.
So, but overall, this card is pretty good.
Yeah. It's probably not quite commander playable, but we wanted to mention it. And, we went over basically all the options here in those colors. And of course, we mentioned the ones that probably aren't good enough, but a lot of these are good enough.
They
and
are.
If you didn't know they exist, because a lot of them are old, take a look for your decks. It's pretty nice to be able to bust out a counterspell in colors that don't traditionally do that. The story's always fun, and some of these are genuinely decent cards. So any final thoughts here from you guys on some of these, on counterspells that are off blue?
I think this still falls into the category that we've discussed before. I do believe we actually had a show on counterspells a while back. It falls into the category of, are counters better than actual removal? So then you got to try to justify your point there, because it's 1 for 1. Why not just, remove the card off the battlefield instead of countering it? Because you could get into a counter war then. And I mean, I don't know. Personally, I don't play counterspells because I think I hate blue. I've never had good success playing blue. So, but to each their own, I guess.
How about you, Max? Any thoughts on any of these in particular?
So yeah, I think I'm kind of with Chris here. I think it comes down to what do you want to do and what is your deck trying to do. Like, yeah, I've seen enough mana ties or Lapse of Certainties to be like shocked and surprised by them because I forget about them.
Right.
But at the same time, you don't see a lot of Dash Hopes or Imps Mischief because you have Murder, you have, Go for the Throat, you have all these good generic just kill spells in that color. So I think it all depends on what you're doing, what you want to be doing. I do agree with most of the arguments for like Red Elemental Blast and Pyroblast just because they're so cheap and the probability of having a blue deck in your pod is very high. So, but I think outside of those two specific, they just really aren't my playstyle if I'm not playing blue. I don't look to these cards. I'd rather just do what the color wants to do with a disenchant or a burn spell or a kill spell.
So I will go over the couple I'm running briefly and explain my logic. I agree because I have blue decks that don't have any counterspells. So like in part just to, not feel I have to have the same cards in every deck, but also in part sometimes you're like, I don't have enough room for what this deck is doing. I just don't have room to put 4 counterspells in here. However, there's also some situations where what my deck is doing does require a certain thing. So like my Recce deck, there's enough situations where when I go to cast a giant, Kamal Strategic Vow or something, I'm going to win the game if it resolves. And if someone counters it, I've just lost an entire turn, essentially. The Veil of Summer, protecting that from a counterspell, is super, super useful. So like in a different mono green deck, I probably wouldn't be running Veil of Summer. But in that particular deck where there's multiple things I do that wind up being kind of game breaking and will win me the game, Veil is worth having a slot. I talked about how I run my Imps Mischief in my mono black deck. It's a Veto Thorn of the Dusk Rose deck. Veto is a pretty important part of how that deck works. So people tend to want to try to remove Veto. So Imps Mischief is a way to just swerve that, targeted removal spell out of the way into something else. So it's just a way to protect Veto. If it was a different black deck that like had a commander that wasn't reliant on being out for the deck to work most of the time, I probably wouldn't have it there either. And the last one was Lapse of Certainty, which I have in my Super Friends deck. Kind of the same thought process there. If someone casts a Merciless Eviction targeting Planeswalkers, that's really, really bad for me.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Because they're so expensive to cast, too. Like, it's taken me 4 turns usually to get 4 Planeswalkers out because they're all, 3, 4, 5, 6 mana a lot of times. And starting to roll them up to get their abilities where I want them to go. If someone goes to, like, stop me from turning that corner, Lapse of Certainty can buy me that extra turn it takes to get to the point I want to be at. Again, if I was playing a different deck, if I was playing, if I was playing like Kemba Ka Regent or something, what I wanted, maybe I would to stop an austere command or something, but like I think to run counters outside of blue, your deck probably has to be kind of specific and have one thing it's specifically afraid of, maybe. So that's at least my choice in different decks. Like if I was playing, I have a red-green deck, so I could run a Void Fate, and I could run Pyroblast, and I could run Red Elemental Blast, but I don't in that deck because that way those decks work. There's not like one specific silver bullet I want protection from.
Yeah, because each of these counterspells they actually take away from what the core strength of the deck already is. Because the colors already have their core strengths, and this is just one of those added caveats to it that
absolutely
this would be fun to play, but does it really play better than
exactly
like we'll say the artifact one? Would I rather play Shatter over the artifact destruction in a red deck? I mean, that's your what ifs there.
Right. So yeah, that's what I would say is take a look at your deck, and if there's some specific thing these counters would save you from, take a look at them. But definitely I don't think you need to jam a bunch of off-blue counter spells into decks just because you can. Although it would be funny sometimes to do that, but that will wrap up this episode. I'm Dana. You can find me on the Twitterverse at Dana Roach. You can find Max at CMDRCentral_Max, and you can find Chris at WiseSquishy1. Our show is edited by Rafael Garcia. You can find him at Ursa Bearwalker, and our podcast theme is Retro Future Dirty by Kevin MacLeod, licensed via Creative Commons. We will be back on Thursday with a Patron's Deck Tech. Until then, I am Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.